pals, I'm here today to do a sort of TBR wrap-up video for 2022. As many of you may know if you've been watching my channel for any length of time, over the last few years I've really wanted to reduce my physical TBR. I think at the highest I had 367 unread books on my shelves. Bearing in mind I've had this channel now for nearly 10 years. I'm about a week away from my 10-year anniversary of BookTube. And when I started, I had 0 unread books. I was somebody who just bought a book, read it, borrowed a book from the library, read it. And then as soon as I joined BookTube, I came across all these lists of books and I watched all these people like haul an insane amount of books, and it just became my normality to do that. And so I'd say maybe about 4 or 5 years in, I was at like my worst in terms of book hauling. I would buy myself around 10 books a month, and then I got to a point where I was being sent maybe the same amount a month from publishers, and then I would ask for books for Christmas and my birthday. Like that was all I would ask for, and if I got money, all I would spend it on was books. And so like at my birthday in May and then Christmas obviously in December, I would each time get about 30 new books. I think once I hauled 50 new books for Christmas, which is insane. So it got out of hand and I got to the point, like I said, where I had 367 unread books, and I think that was back in like 2017. And around that point I was sort of 5 years into having the channel, and I just started to feel really unhappy with the amount of unread books I have. And when I say this, I don't at all say this as a comment on other people who have a lot of unread books. For me, I feel like my reading tastes have changed quite significantly in the years since I've had the channel, and it got to the point where I had a lot of books on my shelves that the current reader was no longer interested in. So maybe the reader I was in 2015 was really hyped about those books, but the reader I was in 2017, 2018, 2019 had no interest in them at all. And so I realised that throughout my life that was probably going to keep happening. You know, I was going to keep going through these sort of evolutions of taste and I guess themes that were important or interesting to me. And so to have a book for longer than 3 years unread was probably going to mean I was going to sort of fall out of love with wanting to read it. And I didn't want that to happen. I didn't want to look at all these books and feel this weight of expectation and this sort of expectation of disappointment of all these books. And that's the point it had got to. So I was pretty goddamn brutal, and when I hear people talk about how they got to a 0 TBR, most of the people I hear talk about it say they did it by being really harsh on how many books they bought, and they really limited their purchasing. And while I've done that a bit, which I'll talk about a bit more later in the video, in large part I have managed to reduce my TBR through unhauls and DNFing. I was brutal with unhauls. I would sort of look at my shelves every 4 months, and I've done this for the last sort of 3 years, and I would keep unhauling books and just be like, look, are you ever going to read this book? If you have X amount of unread books on your shelf, say 200, and this is one of the 200, and you know that every month you're going to get 10 new books, when will you ever choose this one? When will it ever be the top of those 200 books? And if the answer is never, then why have it? So I would unhaul all those, and then there'd always be sort of a subset that I would feel a little bit like that about, but I'd still want to hold on to, and so I'd keep them. And a lot of the times, those would be books that I'd spent more money on, were really beautiful, like how they looked, and or were from other countries or from like small indie presses, so were like harder for me to have gotten hold of. So I felt less capable of getting rid of them because I couldn't just borrow them from the library or a friend, because, you know, I'd have to get them shipped into the country again. So I would always hold on to those type of books, and then I'd do it again in 4 months. And I got to the point that like when I hadn't looked at those books for 4 months and I did it again, I'd be like, I'm still never going to read this one. Like, why is it still here? So I got more and more brutal as I did these unhauls, until the point where I was unhauling books that I'd have swore I would never unhaul. And I can say that in doing that, there is not a single book I regret unhauling, and I've unhauled a couple of hundred at this point. Now that could be different for some people. Just because I've done this and it's worked for me, it doesn't mean that you would do this and not 2 months later think, oh God, I wish I hadn't unhauled that book. So it's different for everybody, but for me there's been 0 regrets with that. I feel so much happier with how my reading is now, with how my bookshelves are now, and I'm so happy I've done it. So that's pretty much how I've done it. I've unhauled, or the other thing I've done is I have become much better at DNFing. when I started BookTube, I'd never really even heard of like DNFing. I would be someone, like I say, who bought or borrowed a book and read it, and I just sort of push through it if I wasn't enjoying it. And then when I joined BookTube, and a few years in, I was aware of just how many books there were in the world that I wanted to read. The idea of finishing a book I wasn't enjoying became sort of pointless to me, and for a couple of reasons. Firstly, I would think, how many hours is it going to take me to finish this book? And I could be spending those hours on a book I would otherwise enjoy. Secondly, when I'm reading a book I'm not enjoying, it really slows my reading down. I would get to a point where I had 12 books in a stack that I was currently reading, and I would feel too bad to pick up a 13th that I would actually enjoy. So I would keep pushing myself slowly through the 12 and like not enjoying any of them. So it would stop me from reading. So that was another thing. The third thing was that I'm not a massive fan of spending a lot of my time on the channel talking about books I didn't enjoy. And so to sort of finish books, especially if they were lesser known, debut authors, smaller publishers, and slate them, I don't feel great about it. It's fun to be a bit negative every now and again, but I don't want that to be the majority of what I do. So I decided to just be really brutal. And over the last couple of years, I have become like a pro DNFer. I give up on books all the time. And in fact, I have read 96 books in 2022, and I think I've DNF'd at least 65. So like it's, near enough sort of the same. And so, yeah, I sort of unhauled a lot, DNF'd a lot, and I found the happy medium because I do still quite enjoy talking about why I DNF books. But what I do now is I do that over on my Patreon, because I feel like then I don't feel so guilty about talking about these books because a much smaller audience is seeing me talk about them. So that's how it works for me, and I'm so glad I've done that, and I will not be changing that. Like, the DNF content will stay over on Patreon. So that's pretty much how I've done it. And the third way I've done it is I have really reduced the amount of books I bring into the house in sort of two ways. One is I've just stopped buying as many, and have really got myself in a pattern of thinking, are you going to read this in the next 6 weeks? And if not, do you need it? And so this year, I had 72 new books come into the house. 59 of those were books I bought, and 13 were gifted, 8 from family and friends, and 5 from publishers. And that's like probably half what it would have been in 2021. So I was really harsh about what books I picked, and I still feel that in May, which was my birthday month, I had a really bad situation where I think all of the 8 books as presents were in May, and then I got some money for my birthday, and I went in a local indie bookshop in Norwich and sort of impulsively bought quite a few books just because they sounded interesting on the shelves, didn't really look into the reviews, and ended up DNFing most of them. So actually I think that was about 20 to 30 books in that month alone. So if I was to cut out May, I'd be at like 40 books for the year. And I like regret what I did in May. Like, I didn't end up enjoying most of them because I hadn't done enough research. So as to if they would fit my taste. So I, definitely want to stick to the lower buying that I'd done. And how I did that is I just started using the library way more. So if a book was available at the library to borrow, then I would just borrow it instead. So most of the books I've bought have been either books that are published outside of the UK and therefore aren't at my library, or are published in the UK but just aren't well known enough for my library to have bought them, or are from my favourite author. So if a book is from a favourite author, I will not make myself get it from the library because the likelihood is I'm going to love it and I'm going to want to keep it on my shelves to reread. But yeah, I borrowed a lot of books from the library. In the year of 2022, borrowed 94 books from the library. So I borrowed way more books than I bought, although my odds of like how many of them I read is quite low. So now I'm going to go through how much I spent on books. So like I said, I bought 59. That was a total of £692.08, which is a lot, but is way less than I used to spend. And this is my hobby, and that is like less than I make from the channel. Like, I have ads on the channel. I think I probably make at least that a year in ads, so I still haven't use like my own money to purchase these books. So that's something I feel fine about. Like I said, the only thing I feel a bit annoyed about is that a couple of hundred was that of that £692.08 was spent in May, like really impulsively on books that just didn't work for me. So that's my only real regret about that amount. So to break that down, out of the 59 books I bought, I DNF'd 28 of them. So that means that £341.08 was pretty much wasted. They were books I didn't enjoy and I DNF'd. I think that's pretty bad odds. And like I said, a lot of those do sit within the books I purchased in May. So that was my sort of big mistake month, really. Then I read 29 of the books. So that was £335.96. And enjoyed most of the ones I read. I'm going to keep them and I'm sort of happy with that amount. And then I have 2 still unread. So that is £15.04. I didn't really want to carry any over to 2023. But yeah, just have 2 I haven't managed to get to that I still want to read. So still have those 2. Then out of the 13 that were gifted, I DNF'd 8, read 5, and I still have 1 unread that I'm going to carry over to 2023. So yeah, like I said, spent a fair amount. Not really bothered by the amount I spent, but I am bothered by the fact that like nearly half of it was on books that I didn't end up enjoying. Then, like I said, I borrowed 94 books from the library and didn't read. Like loads of them were DNFs, and then a lot of them I just didn't get to and returned, and will probably borrow from the library again to try and read. But that's what I love about the library, like the pressure's just off. You can just be like, oh, like I'll take it back for now and I'll borrow it in a few months again when I actually have the time. So now, and I apologise if like the structure of this video makes no sense. I'm not really sure like what the conclusion should be in terms of the order, but I think this is the way that makes the most sense to me. So I've spoken about like what I bought and how much I spent, and I'm now going to talk about like the breakdown of what I read this year. So like I said, I've read 96 books, one of which I'm still sort of currently reading, but I will finish. 34 of those were new books, books I purchased or were gifted in 2022 and have read in 2022. 23 of them were from my original TBR. So I had some books that I'd had since before 2022, some as old as 10 years I'd had sitting on my shelves, and I read 23 of those. And then the other 39 books were library and audio books. My guess is that like 30 of them are library and like 9 are audio. So like I said, out of 94 books borrowed from the library, I only actually read 30. My guess is that it's like 30 read, 30 DNF'd, and like 34 returned. That's around what I think the library books are. And I tend to borrow books from the library that I'm just like a little bit interested in. Like I borrowed a lot of new releases that I hadn't heard many reviews about, and I feel no guilt of like reading 2 pages and being like, this writing style does not work for me, I'm going to return it. So that's something I absolutely love about the library. And if you have a local library, then I would highly recommend you have a look into the selection, because it's made like such a difference to my reading year. And I think that's the thing that's really helped with not buying books, because as soon as I consider buying a book, I'm like, unless it's a favourite author, does the library have it? And I check immediately. Like I literally go on my library app every single day, at least once a day. I know all the books I have. Like if someone who lived local to me was just like, I wonder if the library has that book, I would probably know, because I obsessively look through the catalogue. So I am fortunate that like for a pretty rural county, I have quite a good library book selection, and my library is like a really nice place to be. And saying that, I really want to try and spend more time in the library in 2023, because out of those 94 books borrowed from the library, probably 90 of those were ones I like reserved. And at my library, you have to pay 60p per book you reserve. So I have spent a decent amount of money reserving books at the library, which is quite unusual. I don't think a lot of counties in the UK do that. My library does, and I don't really mind because I want them to stay open. So I just look at it as like a charitable donation to the library. So there was that. So the last thing I want to talk about is, did I manage to get my TBR to 0? If any of you are like writing all this down and good at maths, you've probably worked it out, but I'm sure none of you are that nerdy that you've done that. So I started at 67 books at the start of 2022. 67 books I hadn't read. Okay, I DNF'd 13 of them. I unhauled 21. And out of those books I unhauled, a few of them I just thought, actually I'm not really that interested in them, or I started to hear bad things about them. A few of them I looked into more on Goodreads and saw some negative reviews that I felt would reflect like what I would think if I read it. And then I also had a day where I sat with a stack of, I think, 12 books in bed, and I just sort of skimmed through them. So I don't class it as DNFing them, because it was more like, let's just have a brief look at a few pages and see what the writing style is like. And I decided they weren't for me. So that sort of really helped me unhaul quite a few books. That's something I'd really recommend. If you have a stack of books on your shelves that you're like, I'm just not sure about these, just sit with them for like an hour. And if none of them like spark joy, get rid of them. That's what I did. So yeah, DNF 13, unhauled 21, read 23, which means I have 10 unread. And like I mentioned, I also have 3 books unread from the new books I bought, because 2 I bought and haven't read, and 1 I was gifted and haven't read. So that means I have 13 books left to read on my TBR. And I've been going back and forth the last few weeks about what to do about those 13 books, because I really want to get to 0. Not even just to be like, I got to 0, both for myself and like for this project on the channel, but also because I just want to have a stack of, I just want that feeling of like complete refresh. I want that feeling of all of these books on my shelves I've literally just got, and I'm so excited about them, and it's just going to continuously roll over. I want to be the person I was more than 10 years ago, who just went to the library, went to the bookshop, got a stack of 6 books, and I used to come home and I used to read the first few pages of each book, put them in order of the one I'm going to read first to last, and just work through them and go, do that in like however long, and then go back and get more. And I loved it. It made me so happy. And reading is such a mood changer for me. I'm somebody who has a really, and I don't know if there's like a term for this, but my mood is very easily affected by the media I'm consuming, which is why I DNF a lot. Because if I'm reading a book and not enjoying it, it genuinely makes me feel miserable. It makes me feel really low, and yeah, it just makes me feel rubbish and sort of lethargic and horrible. And if I'm reading a book I'm enjoying, it makes me so like cheerful. Like I'll be way more likely to like dance and sing around the house. Johnny can always tell if I'm loving or hating a book based on my mood. So that's why I DNF a lot. Because I just don't want to be miserable, and that's why I really want to get to this fresh new place with my reading, because I think it will just make me happier in general. So I was like, should I get rid of all 13 of them? And then I went through them all to check which ones were at the library, because if they're at the library, then I can just borrow them when I want to and read them, and I don't actually need to own them. So I considered just getting rid of the ones that were at the library, and then I was like, what about the ones that aren't at the library? So yeah, I think this is where I need a little bit of help. So I'm going to briefly go through the 13 books and get your opinions on what you think I should do, and whether you think I should like get rid of all the ones that are at the library or hold on to them. And I'm still sort of working through my plans, and I will be doing a like 2023 plans video. And hopefully by then, with your help, I will have solidified what I will do with these 13, and I will talk about that in that video. But for now, I'm just going to talk about the books. This is the only book I have that I hauled in my first ever booktube video, which is hilarious when I look back on it now. And I still have it, so I've had it for 10 years. And that is Middlemarch by George Eliot. And I've held on to it for all these years because I do still sort of want to read this book. But classics never really make it to the top of my list, and actually for the last 5 or 6 years I've barely read any classics. But I've always held on to this book because I feel like it's a book I would like to read in my lifetime, and also it was a gift and it's a really nice edition. So I still have it, but I'm sort of never pulled to reading it. So should I keep this one? I've heard the audio is really good. I'm not sure if it's a book once I've read I'll actually want to own, so don't know. Then these next few are ones that I've had for longer than 2022. The first one is Dispatches from Syria, The Morning They Came for Us by Janine D. Giovanni. And this is a very short non-fiction book, so it feels like one I could really easily get through. And I really want to read it still, but my library does have a copy. The next one is Creating Freedom, Power, Control and the Fight for Our Future by Raul Martinez. Jen actually bought me this as a gift a few years ago, and I was like, this is amazing. This is exactly the sort of book I want to read. Still haven't read it. pretty much because it's quite long. I still really want to read it, but again, like in order to do the zero TBR, my library has a copy of this, so I'm like, should I just borrow it? Don't know. And then the last one I think I bought in 2021 is Blacklisted, Black British Culture Explored by Jeffrey Bioke. And again, my library has a copy, so not sure whether I should just borrow this from the library. I tried it on audio and decided it was definitely a book I wanted to read physically. So again, could borrow this. So what should I do about those? Then these two. One of them is a book I bought in 2022 and haven't yet read, and that is Mrs. March by Virginia Fito. As soon as I bought this, I regret it because I'm not like 100% sure I'm going to like it. And my library has a copy and I have it on audio, but I was in Waterstones and there was a buy one paperback, get one half price sale, so I got it. The other book I got in the deal, I've already DNF'd, and pretty much as soon as I got them home, I regretted it. It was just a moment of weakness. So I think I feel pretty okay about just like getting rid of this one and listening on audio or borrowing it from the library, but let me know your thoughts. And the last one I was sent from the publisher, and that is Annie John by Jamaica Kincaid. Very short book. This is a coming of age book I've like had on my radar for absolute years. Would really like to read it, but do I need to own it or can I just borrow it from the library? Then these last 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 are books my library does not have. So if I get rid of them, will not be able to easily get hold of them again. The first one is one I've owned for years. This is Beyond the Pale by Emily Urquhart. This is a memoir that I actually read the first couple of chapters of years ago when I got it and really enjoyed, so have no excuse. This one was sent to me, I think in 2021 from the publisher, and that is Crippled: Austerity and the Demonisation of Disabled People by Frances Ryan. This is a quite short non-fiction book, so again, feels like I could easily get through it. Then I have this collection of essays which sort of form a memoir, I'm Telling the Truth But I'm Lying by Bassie Ikpi. There is no way I'm getting rid of this one. I definitely want to read it. I'm not annoyed with myself, I haven't made time for it this year. Then we have Care Work, Dreaming Disability Justice by Leah Lakshmi Pepsina Samarasina. Again, there's no way I'm getting rid of this one. I bought this right at the end of 2021. Really want to read it, just haven't made time for it this year, but again, want to get to it quickly. And then I have two novels I've had for ages. This is Awakening by Stevie Davies. I think this has like less than 20 reviews on Goodreads, so I have no idea like if I'm going to enjoy this or not because I can't really tell from the reviews. But this is a historical fiction book from a small Welsh publisher that I like the sound of, so picked up quite a few years ago. And then lastly, I have this US publication, and that's Willow and Hesper by Amy Feltman. This doesn't have amazing reviews on Goodreads, but I just stumbled across this in a second-hand bookshop in the UK and like wouldn't be able to find this unless I got it imported. So I've sort of always kept hold of it. If you've read this one, tell me your thoughts. And then the last one that I'm definitely keeping is We Do This Till We Free Us, Abolitionist Organising and Transforming Justice by Mariam Akabe. This is a book I bought in 2022, haven't made the time to read, but definitely want to read. So the ones I am like 100% sure I am keeping, and I will definitely break my rule for, are these three. We Do This Till We Free Us, Care Work, Dreaming Disability Justice, and I'm Telling the Truth But I'm Lying. But all the other books, I'm willing to hear your thoughts and be convinced either way, whether you think I should like unhaul them and not bother reading them, or unhaul them and borrow from the library, or whatever. And if I do keep them all or keep a certain number, then I feel like I need to have a rule about how quickly I get to them, because I have just been gifted some books for Christmas, and I've also ordered a few books, but I haven't counted them in my 2022 purchases because they haven't arrived yet. So I count books when they arrive in the post because I order a lot of books from the US. They take a few weeks to get to me. So it doesn't make sense to me to count them as a 2022 purchase when I can't yet actually read them. So yeah, I will be doing a book haul when all those books have arrived, and I have about, I think, 15 books to talk about. So I already have like 15 new books to be reading. I also have quite a few books on hold at the library that will hopefully be coming in the new year. So I feel like I already have like enough of a new TBR without including these, and I'm worried that I'll then like focus on the new books and leave these ones again. So I feel like I need a rule maybe that like every third book has to be an old one so that I still get through these and like have finished them all by the end of March. Otherwise, you know, I shouldn't hang on to them again to have them sit unread on my shelves for another year. So I'm thinking that's the sort of rule I need to implement, but that rule will be decided based on how many I carry over. So do let me know your thoughts. I would love to know, like any of the information I just shared, if you have the same information, if you have recorded it, like how many books you bought in 2022, like how much of the books you read were like library books or your own books or audio books, what your TBR is, if you have any TBR plans, and if so, how you're gonna like achieve them. All these things, I find it fascinating. I'm very, very nosy. I could listen to other people talk about this stuff for hours. So yeah, I'd love to hear. I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope it all made sense. I'm too lazy basically to do pie charts and graphs for you. I always really appreciate it when other people do them, but I'm not that good. So you just had to put up with me rambling on from my little scrawled notes in my notebook. So I hope you enjoyed the video, and I will see you in a few days in the next one. Thanks for watching. Bye.